I'm Stephen Price.
Hello, I'm Cara Githens.
This is The Innkeepers, a podcast by Sanctuary Inn. At Sanctuary Inn, we believe we are called to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing guests who have much to teach us about the many facets of missionary care. Let's learn together and be encouraged to press on in the work God has given each one of us to do.
Well, Cara, we are now recording episode number 8.
Woohoo!
So we've decided that in our world of podcasting anyway, we're going to do 8 episodes for a season. So this we're finishing season 1 tonight.
That is quite the accomplishment for us, and I'm super. I'm really glad that we just got this off the ground and running, and that we have people listening and joining in with us. It's just super encouraging.
Yeah, we've been able to actually post 2 episodes online as of the date of this recording, and by the time this recording actually gets out there, there will have been the 7th. This is number 8, so we'll see. We're excited. We're glad that people are listening, and we're very grateful.
Yeah, so tonight we wanted to talk some about the continuum of care in the world of missionary care, and kind of tell a little bit of our story of how we landed at what we're doing here at Sanctuary Inn.
Yeah, and this story really goes back a ways, because I know at least back in 2013 when we were praying / dreaming / planning about Sanctuary Inn, what would it look like and so on, we had to figure out where we fit on this continuum or on the spectrum of missionary care, because there's a lot of things available to missionaries, all the way from very intense psychological care to housing someone's spare bedroom almost. It kind of goes from one end to the other. But we had to look at who we are and what our skill sets were, and really where is our heart. What was God calling Sanctuary Inn to do? And that's those were the questions we were wrestling through 2013, 2014, and so on, as we were really looking at kind of building the personality, as it were, of Sanctuary Inn. And as we go through our time tonight, I just think it's really important that I mention that we are not in any way critical of anything that anyone else is doing. We have a place, we have a niche, and we feel like God has given us this ministry of that's kind of unique to us. But that doesn't mean anyone else is doing anything wrong. Everyone is doing what God has called them to do. 1 Corinthians 12 reminds us that the church is made up of many parts, and they're not all the same. No one is less important than the other. And it's the same in the world of missionary care. We don't all have the same calling. We all have different gifts and talents and abilities and interests, and that's what God is calling us to do. And so the manifestation of care is going to look different in each circumstance.
Yeah, and if we all did the exact same thing, there would be a whole lot of hurt and need out there that's not being addressed. And I think as we were dreaming, our dream team gathered and prayed and all those years and talked and discussed and came up with our mission statement and all that, we really were trying to figure out how best can we serve and where is there a need and how can we do the part that God is asking us to do. And so we are so, so grateful for those who provide care that we don't, because we can't be all things to all people. We have our certain skill sets and resources and what we have available here in the Northwest to us, and so we wanted to make sure that we provided good care for missionaries, and that it was a little more holistic, I think, is what we were hoping for. Yeah. We knew we didn't want to just be a place for people to stay, but we also knew that we weren't going to be like Link Care or some of these other facilities that have a really structured program and are providing intensive psychological assessment and care, for intensive trauma or psychiatric problems or things like that. So we're not quite along those lines, and we just had to figure out where we fit in between.
Yeah, and everything on the spectrum has its place. from side to side, everything has a place. And I just want to give testimony that our family, we've been on the receiving end of a lot of very gracious missionary care. We were 14 months in mission housing in the state of Georgia before we moved to Europe. We had churches that had clothes closets that they made available to us and so on, which met very really significant needs at the time. Everything was important at each time, and so we are grateful for all the different facets of missionary care that are available.
Yeah, and as we are grateful for all of them, we have over the last 3 years really, I think, begun to find our niche.
Yeah.
And what we really valued in creating this space here at Sanctuary Inn. And a huge value for us was that it would be a place for the whole family to come.
Yeah.
And not just a place that the parents can come and get away and the kids somehow need to be dropped off at Grandma and Grandpa's or something like that.
Yeah.
We wanted a place for the whole family. And God really did provide that here at Sanctuary Inn with the acreage that we have and the woods and the river and the big field for the kids to run and play. This is a child's paradise. So it is so awesome that God answered that prayer for us.
Yeah. And there are times that parents do come and they choose, the kids do go to Grandma and Grandpa's. And a lot of times the parents come and they'll come like for an initial time. And then often we see them come back with their kids too. But that having a space for the entire family was really important to us. One of the other things that was very important to us was the fact that our policy is kind of open-ended in terms of your stay. And I know some facilities, because of their limitations and schedules and so on, can offer a week or 2 weeks or 10 days or something for a family or a couple to stay in. And we have just seen from our history of ministry and so on, we feel that the opportunity to stay someplace for a long period of time is really important, and it can really meet a significant need for a family. It's not everyone's need. We've had people here for 2 days, 3 days, and we had a family here for a year. And we just bid farewell to a family that was here for,
I think, 6 months.
6 months, yeah. And so, and they sort of got trapped in the COVID thing. But anyway,
But we were a safe place for them. They could stay. They didn't have to move one more time.
Right. Yeah. They had moved so many times, getting ready to move overseas, and then they sort of got caught in the COVID world, and then they were able to come and stay with us and finish up their time. So that was something super significant to us, is that we kind of leave that open end. We often check in. We're like, okay, we're leaving this open-ended, but every month we're going to check in and see, is this working for you? Is it working for us? Because that doesn't mean that if we have the open-end policy that we just let people move in and never move out.
True. But we have that possibility. Usually it's 1 or 2 families, probably tops at a time with our facility, that we are able to extend that kind of an invitation to.
Right.
But that safe landing place of having a longer stay really has meant a huge difference to the families that have been able to take us up on that.
Yeah.
And another piece that we've valued in that is that we don't necessarily charge a set fee for a missionary's stay with us. We know that a lot of times missionaries are in the midst of raising support, or they're under-supported, or their funds are just tight. And so we do a lot of work here at Sanctuary Inn to subsidize the cost of a missionary stay, and they then make a donation or have supporters make a donation towards their stay. We've had churches pay for their missionary to come and stay with us, so the missionary themselves hasn't paid for any of their stay. Yeah,
we've seen that several times where the supporting church or churches have stepped in and made a contribution for their stay.
So we really want this place of rest to be available to any missionary who needs it, and cost never to be the factor that keeps them away. Yeah,
that's been kind of one of those guiding principles, that money is not the deciding factor. And so and graciously God's provided so that we are able to offer that. And that's not everyone's situation, but that's something that we've made a priority, and God has graciously met that need.
And most missionaries are so eager to give what they can towards their stay, and they want to support and be a part of contributing. So that has been encouraging to us, that we haven't been necessarily mooched off of because of this.
No. People really do they want to contribute, and they do everything they can.
And they're so grateful.
The reality is that sometimes someone is staying with us and they're still renting a house.
I know, they're paying overseas.
Somewhere else they're already paying. So
we don't want that to mean, well, your money's all tied up, so now you can't stay with us.
Now you can't stay. So, well, now I'm going to go even a little further back in time, because as we talk about Sanctuary Inn and who we are and what we offer, and really our personality as a ministry, I was struck way back in 2003, which is like
ancient history,
right? Our family had moved back from Europe. We were living in Tennessee. I won't even tell you that story. But we were working for a small homeschool ministry, and that day I was reading my Bible, and I was reading in John 5. And this is Jesus at the pool of Bethesda. And in verse 6 it says, "When Jesus saw the man lying there and knew he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, 'Do you wish to get well?'" And then I read it in the King James, and it reads, it reads pretty much the same, but the question then phrased in the King James says, "Wilt thou be made whole?" And I cannot tell you how that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Wilt thou be made whole? I feel like that day God just opened up my eyes to that passage and those thoughts. And I wrote, and that morning in my devotions, I mean, I have my journal. I can show it to you if you ever drop by. But there's 13 pages I wrote that day just about thoughts about wholeness. And I think that the concept of wholeness is really behind Sanctuary Inn. It's behind the dream that we had for a place where people could come and experience the presence of God. And so we're just going to share a few thoughts on the concept of wholeness before we get into another discussion about some of these ministries and organizations that provide care and what they provide. But wholeness is so important, I think, because our journey to wholeness begins with our complete and total submission to Jesus Christ. It begins with our redemption. We turn to Christ in salvation, and then we must daily submit our lives to Christ, which is the work of sanctification. It's that daily work of redemption, the ongoing work of redemption. The daily cleansing and submission of our lives, our will, and our desires. And that's really what Christ wants us to see, and he wants to transform us by us being willing to surrender ourselves daily.
Yeah, that really comes down to that willingness is a choice. We have been given free will to choose wholeness. I mean, Jesus says to the man, "Do you want to be whole?" Like, he's giving him a choice.
Yeah.
And that's what's staggering to me in life and ministry and people I've worked with. It is sometimes people do turn down wholeness.
Yeah.
They say, I'm doing well enough. I think I'll pass. And, I hope you always hope that someone won't do that.
Right.
But that's the amount of freedom God has given us. And we here at Sanctuary Inn are often inviting people, and I think that's the question that we're often have in our minds and our hearts for people, our guests who come here, is we want wholeness for you. Will you pursue that with us?
Right.
Will you allow God to enter into your story and your pain and your heartache and your struggles, and will you allow God to bring about healing from sin and bondage and brokenness in your hearts and your minds, and choose a different way to go.
Right. And so we have to be willing to make those changes. And it's unfortunate when someone's given that opportunity to change, or given that here's what could happen. It could be this way, and they don't step into that. And so I think when Jesus talked to that man at the pool and said, "Wilt thou be made whole?" That man had to decide: do I want to be whole? Am I willing to step into this healing and into this forgiveness? And then another thought from John chapter 5 is that when we live with known sin in our lives, we're saying that we know better than God. It's kind of like, it goes back to Adam and Eve in the garden. And Satan, the lie that he gave to Adam and Eve was that it's okay. You can make the decision for yourself. God doesn't know what's best. You make the decision what's best for you. And that lie can ensnare us to this day, and it often does. But our unwillingness puts away known sin such as pornography, adultery, anger, criticism, unforgiveness. These things will stop our growth in wholeness.
Yeah, it's really amazing how we can choose to live in the lie and that we don't need change. Even when God, stands before us and says, "Do you want to be whole?"
Yeah.
We have to see that wholeness, that the truth, the goodness that God is offering us is better, and that Satan is lying to us when we think that our sin is just fine. Mm-hmm. And so it's a challenge for us to make that choice, to turn to God and ask Him to heal our hearts, our minds, and to listen to His voice instead of all of the world around us, whether it's media or social media or the lies that somehow you can be good enough, or that
or you're not good enough,
or it's just the lies that somehow we can take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, that man who was lying there, he was doing what he could. He was lying by the pool.
Right.
He was doing everything he could do.
Yeah, and
to be made whole.
He told Jesus, "I want to be well, but I can't get into that pool because when the angel stirs the water, someone else gets in there before I can get in there."
So he was doing all the right things, right?
Yeah.
But he was still depending on his own strength. Yeah. And so I think it's really an amazing thing when we turn to God and say, "No, God, I want you to heal me and to make me whole."
Yeah, because we live in a world that lies to us. We live in a world that says you're not pretty enough, you're not accomplished enough, you're not successful enough, you're not whatever. I mean, it's all around us every day. And so we have to find the truth of what God is telling us.
Yeah, and we want to reflect God's work of wholeness. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an invitation. I mean, God has invited us. Even as we're inviting people to come here to Sanctuary Inn and experience this wholeness, God has, I think, convicted us in our own hearts of we need to model this wholeness of God being enough and being the one to make us whole. Yeah. It's a journey. Yeah.
It is a journey. It's not an overnight. It's just like it's that work of sanctification that is a daily work. Another thought about the journey of wholeness. It certainly involves spiritual changes, but it can often involve physical changes. And I think back to an interview we did earlier this year with Dr. Barney, and he talked about how one of his main pieces of advice he gives to people is he asks them, "Are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Are you eating well?" I mean, just those three things, our sleeping, our eating, our exercising, those three things can be so significant in our lives, because often when we start depriving ourselves of sleep, when we don't take the time to just go out and go for a walk and breathe some fresh air and get a new perspective, we start really harming ourselves, because we don't sleep as well and so on. And so we start a cycle that can really spiral downward very quickly. And so we never should take our health for granted. It is a gift. Our health is a gift, and sleep is a gift. Every night, God gives us the gift of sleep so that we can be restored, so that we can be ready for that new day. I mean, it's amazing, the work of sleep. I mean, that's a whole other discussion about what sleep does for you and how it restores you and gets you ready for the next day.
Yeah, and I feel like that has been at the core of what we invite people to here at Sanctuary Inn. Is a lot of it is rest and physical rest.
Yeah.
And we have often said, hey, come have some good food and enjoy the community, but also have a great nap today. Or go for a walk in our woods and enjoy the beauty in the nature and breathe deeply and see beauty. And all those things, we invite people to them because we believe they're part of the wholeness picture.
Yeah.
That God can use even these things that seem simple to restore our souls and our hearts and our minds and our bodies.
I mean, so many people, I've referred them to the story of the prophet Elijah and when he faced down the prophets of Baal, and then he ran from that encounter and was exhausted. He was spiritually exhausted and physically exhausted, and God, I mean, God told him to sleep. God fed him. God told him to go back to sleep again. He fed him again because he still had a lot of work to do. He had a lot for him and a lot in his life. But those things, sleeping and eating, that was so significant just to restore him back to his ministry. Well, there's a lot of thoughts, and we could spend the whole podcast talking about that, but we're not here to spend the whole podcast on just the origins or the history of Sanctuary Inn. But these things are very foundational to who we are, and who we are and the ministry we do has been shaped by these thoughts.
Yeah. So those thoughts were stirring in our hearts and our minds when our dream team was gathering together and building out our mission statement. And part of our mission statement says that we exist to equip, refresh, and restore global workers. So those three key words: equip, refresh, and restore. We believe we equip by providing a place here at Sanctuary Inn where we can have time to discuss and debrief and process their life stories. That's a lot of what I do with our guests that come here. Just help them understand some of the process of a cross-cultural transition and what that looks like. And there's some patterns and known facets of that journey that often people are unaware of. And so when we sit down and have a conversation and we talk through what transition looks like for a lot of people and what's normal and what's not normal in that process, we're equipping them. And we also really want to educate and help people discover rhythms of life and rest and activity, just like we were talking about, that we believe is part of wholeness, of being healthy individuals that are healthy spiritually, emotionally, physically, and have what they need to move forward in those areas.
Yeah, and so much of that goes back to permission. We don't give ourselves permission to rest. We don't give ourselves permission to relax. And for a whole lot of different reasons.
Yes.
But I think one of the things I hear you talk with people about when they come is we are giving you permission to rest and permission to relax. And we don't have expectations. So just everything is fine. Just relax and rest.
And we don't have a big agenda. And that's one unique factor of our ministry and kind of where we fit in the spectrum and continuum of care is that we are not a program-based ministry. We have a program that has been put together for our TCK kids that come through, while I'm meeting with the parents doing a debriefing, the kids get this great program.
Right.
It's an hour and a half to 2 hour program. Usually once or twice, depending on the length of their stay with us, right? Uh-huh. But other than that structured time where they have a debriefing, the families come to rest and go for walks or ride bikes or take naps or just find time to read that book that they've been wanting to read. And we have a little library, and I'm known for assigning homework books.
Yes.
Most guests leave here with a book in hand to read. But we really think that these things of finding that rhythm and that of rest is healing.
Yeah.
And that's equipping them with tools for when they go back to ministry,
Right.
that they continue patterns of rest.
When you tell them about a transition and what to expect, and like, you're going to go through this phase and this phase and this phase, you're equipping them. You're giving them the tools as a family to talk it through when they get back on the field and say, remember that time we spent with Car, and she said, this time in this transition really was going to be a struggle for us. How are we doing with that? And so you're equipping them.
Yes, and when we say, hey, here is what is healthy in transition, that you take time and that you physically may be more tired because of transition. Yeah. And so it's okay to pull back and maybe take some more naps if you can. I know when people have little kids, naps are few and far between, but maybe nap when your kid naps. So just that, helping them understand so that they can be more refreshed and rested. And we want the conversations that we have and that restoring, sitting around the table. I don't know how many people who've eaten Joanne's cookies, chocolate chip cookies, and sat and talked with us around the table, and just that cozy environment we have here, and they just feel at ease.
Right.
And that is a part of us providing refreshment, and it's not because they sat through a lecture.
Yeah, we do a lot to try to take care of your needs, and obviously there's we can't do everything, but we make every effort to have a comfortable place to sleep, meals prepared for you, and really don't put a lot of demands on your time so that you can experience a sense of refreshment. Yes,
and I think one of the huge factors for us that God has provided this place of refreshment is the location.
Yeah.
That we have the woods, that we have the Salmon River right here on the edge of our property, that we have just a place for people to take a deep breath and enjoy the beauty and go up and see Mount Hood. And nature just speaks to people's souls.
Yeah.
Because the God who created all that created them and is going to take care of them just as he took care of the lilies of the field, right?
That's right. And so I think, Cara, through a lot of your conversation and counseling with people, we're trying to do that restoration part of our mission statement.
Yes, and also when we can't do all the work that we want to do here, I do a lot of referring out. I refer out for healing prayer with some friends of the ministry, with Calvin and Julie Hadema, who are definitely deeply involved with us here. And other counselors I've referred out to for ongoing care, because we don't provide, I do debriefing, but I don't do ongoing counseling here on site. And there's been psychologists or psychiatrists or pastoral care, or just all kinds of different resources that are locally for people. And then, globally, and that's some of what we want to talk about, of how we're just a piece of the puzzle.
We're just a piece of the puzzle, that's right, yeah. So sometimes we even invite people to jump in and get their hands dirty. Sometimes they'll help us with a project or do something, and that can be very therapeutic too, because a lot of people process things while they're working with their hands. They can be busy processing something, and so we've seen that happen here as well.
Yes, some people come and chop wood and say that that's therapeutic.
Yes, we've had those conversations, or maybe, just helping us with different tasks or chores, which we do try to minimize. We don't bring people here to work, just to make that clear. But often there are things, always something to do around here.
And some people, the work of their hands is just, while their hands are busy, their mind and their soul can just rest. Because so much of ministry is emotionally and mentally tasking and very, very exhausting for some people. And they physically have the energy, but mentally don't have the energy. So doing something a little more mindless, well, hopefully not too mindless, while they're chopping wood.
Yeah, be careful there. I have the stitches to prove it. But anyway, everything is good. as we were talking before, kind of back in the beginning, and trying to figure out where Sanctuary Inn will fit in this whole continuum, when we were talking to people, one of the things that we often said was, imagine that someone goes to the emergency room and they have a medical emergency and they're going to go to an emergency room and get taken care of. That is one end of the care, kind of. It's an emergency sort of aspect. And then after that, obviously, they have to get discharged, they have to convalesce, or so on and so on. And so as you sort of move down the spectrum of care, as it were, and so maybe that's a helpful example, I don't know, but that's a helpful illustration to kind of give you the idea that we, on one end, is our organizations that deal with very serious issues and are equipped and trained to deal with that particular thing. And then as it moves down the scale, then the issues, either they're recovering from that or the issues were never that intense or so on. And so anyway, there's just kind of a word picture to keep that in mind. Carl, why don't you kind of talk a little bit about some of the people that are more equipped to deal with some of the more serious things that missionaries might encounter?
So one of the organizations that does some of the most critical care in missionary care is an organization called Care. They are in Northern California, and they provide a place to stay as well as intensive counseling and psychological assessment, and it's a treatment facility essentially for missionaries and their families who have experienced either crisis or trauma or abuse or war or things like that, where it's pretty significant. And maybe it's not necessarily that the incident was so significant, but the impact also on the individual or family was really traumatic and overwhelming, and they need a place to go and process. Yes, yeah. Just like when we talked with Steve Tracing, it isn't always necessarily the severity of the incident so much as the severity of the reaction for the person and what kind of care they need. Yeah. So Care kind of does that most intense work. There's some other organizations like Godspeed Resources, which we interviewed Dr. Barney Davis. He and that organization have a couple different psychiatrists, and they provide resources right now, especially in the midst of COVID, all online, which is a huge, huge gift. So Godspeed Resources has psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, who all can provide care online. So that is a great resource for people who maybe they need some intense support, but they don't necessarily know if they can afford or go to a location. Godspeed works, I think, exclusively outside of the U.S. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, say you are in another country serving around the world and you're not quite sure where to get help, I really would recommend you look at their website. So that's Godspeed Resources. Right. So another couple different organizations that are kind of further down, I would say, down the spectrum, that more kind of support, like maybe what would you say, rehab kind of support places. Okay. Where you're going where you know that you're struggling but you're not in crisis. Right. There's some of those places where, like Mission Training International has some great pre-field and some great preparation before you go, but also they have some really good debriefing. It's intensive debriefing, and it's a very good program. And if you need something that's kind of programmed, they're excellent at that. Yeah, they're located just north of Colorado Springs. So. Yeah. And then there's a lot of different facilities that provide housing or kind of debriefing and support for a week to 2 weeks. Right. We really found when we were looking at what we would provide that most places 2 weeks is kind of their max. Yeah. For on-location care.
Right.
But they are definitely out there and a great resource. So Life Impact Ministries does that kind of care. There's, I think, Marble Retreat does that. They have kind of a retreat center for pastors and missionaries. What else do you know of in that realm? I think Heartstream does something like that in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. And that's one of those things. Sometimes you can just start searching on the internet and you'll find someone that could accommodate what you're looking for. I know someone that we really love and we're going to get more of a chance to talk to in the not too distant future is Barnabas International. And they're interesting sort of because they go to the missionaries on the field.
Yeah.
And they often lead conferences or provide counseling or provide that resourcing on the mission field where the missionary is. And that's really critical sometimes because the missionary often is in a place where they can't leave what they're doing right now. There's another organization, Mobile Member Care Team, and they're not on the field now, but they have a lot of resources. And as I was researching for today, a lot of organizations have a huge amount of resources available online. So you can go online and find information, articles about transition, about third culture kids, about really critical issues, depression, suicide. I mean, a lot of things people have written very, very good articles and have a lot of good information. And can often, there's a link to put you in touch with someone if you're needing to pursue something further.
And then there's a couple counseling centers around the world that provide care. There's Olive Tree Counseling Center. They are in Turkey.
Right.
And they provide care for that whole North Africa, Middle East, Europe, Eastern Europe area. And they have some great resources. There's Cornerstone Counseling Center, which is in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And they are also a place for missionaries to go and get care. And I think both of these facilities are doing a lot of work online right now.
Right.
So, COVID has changed how a lot of the organizations are delivering care and what counseling is being done online, which opens up even more of a possibility. And then, we have our dear friend Lynn Paulson, who also does counseling. We interviewed her in this season. And her Careport Counseling Ministry is a great online resource for counseling. So there's some really good supports there virtually these days.
Yeah.
I think Kenya, can't quite remember. There's a resource in Kenya also for a counseling center.
Okay.
So there's some good counseling centers out there on the field where you can get resources.
Yeah, and speaking of around the world, one of the names that comes up, of course, is Global Member Care Network. And they have a very active Facebook page, so you can just go online, look for Global Member Care Network, often referred to by their initials, GMCN. And what's great about them is they also have networks, not just in North America. I mean, they have networks in Asia, Africa, Europe, Korea, South America, India, Thailand, and so on. And so they are not just providing missionary care and support and counseling and so on for missionaries just that are North American and so on. But they have a lot of resources available, and so they have a lot of great articles and they have a lot of great resources available through their website. So that's another, through the website or their Facebook page, to go and check them out, and they have a lot of great information.
Yeah, to get back to that one that I was blanking on who that organization was in Kenya. Yeah. There's Tumaini Counseling Centers. I hope I'm not botching that pronunciation. Anyways, it's TUMAINI. Counseling.net is their website. They have counseling in Africa.
Okay.
So they're based in Nairobi, and they have locations in Nairobi and actually, I guess, in Kampala and Uganda as well. So that's a great resource for you if you're on that side of the world.
Okay. Another thing that there are area where there's a lot of resources are Missionary Kits. And so there are a lot of websites and other organizations that specifically address issues about missionary kids. Talk about Mukapa.
So Mukapa is kind of like your on-college campus club. So not quite a sorority, but it is a club that's on various campuses here in the U.S. and Canada, where MKs, missionary kids, get together and hang out and have activities, go on retreats, do game nights, do different things to create community and support MKs who are in college and oftentimes feel pretty alone in the midst of that transition from, a missionary kid on the field to living in a dorm in college. And, MK will connect with another MK faster than anyone else.
Right.
I know that I cherished my years at Mukapa when I was at Biola University and met some of my dearest friends that I'm still in touch with today through that. So if you know of a missionary kid who is on a college campus, have them check and see if they have a Mukapa kind of club on campus, and Mukapa are the Greek letters MK.
Yes.
So,
yeah, and there are the MK Reentry Seminars.
Yes, there are quite a few of those. There's so the Narramore Foundation, in conjunction with Barnabas, does one that's out of Biola University. And they have a transition seminar.
And Biola and Houghton, usually. Houghton College.
Houghton also does one. That's a separate organization,
okay.
I think. Anyways, you can find out about what the ones that Barnabas does at Barnabas International website. They have those MK transition seminars. And then there's interaction.org. Right. They have MK transition seminars as well, and theirs are in Colorado area, I believe.
Yeah.
And I believe there's probably another one, I think, on the East Coast. But if you poke around and you're looking for something, I don't know how COVID is impacting this. I haven't looked into these specifically for 2021. But hopefully by next summer, these usually happen in the summer for college students who are in the summer before they start their first semester, freshman year. They go for a week to 2 weeks to these transition seminars and hang out with other MKs and get just some support and encouragement. And
some just basic education about, if you haven't been in the States for a while, here's some things you need to know.
Yeah, so, like how to open a bank account,
yeah.
how to buy a car, how to
navigate DMV,
how to pump gas in the car, just some basic things. Super helpful. Right. I went through an MK transition seminar for myself, and it was pretty life-changing for me.
Yeah. There's a couple other good TCK resources. One of them, a website, TCK World, the official home of third culture kids, and that's has a lot of good articles and things written by TCKs focused on them. Another one is called denizenmag.com. Denizen magazine or mag.com, and those are again written by TCKs for TCKs, and again a lot of good helpful information on those websites and things that could be useful, and it could be a support, especially as if you have kids transitioning or just really looking to connect and need to reach out and develop some friendships. So those are some possibilities too. So those are some TCK or missionary kid resources. We realize that the more we just sit here talking between ourselves, it's like, oh, wait.
We forgot them, or who's that?
Right.
Yeah, so forgive us. If we didn't mention your organization and you want us to know about you, and there's some we know about but we didn't write down, and it didn't get aired in this podcast, please forgive us. But we know there's a whole world of wonderful resources,
Right.
and we're so grateful for all of you out there.
And feel free to email us, because we would love to include you, because one of the things we're building into our website is a resource page. And there's a lot of people that have done a great job building in their resource pages, and we just want to jump on that and keep building that. I know, Cara, a name you mentioned that's kind of the grandfather, so to speak, of all this missionary care movement.
Yeah, it's Mental Health and Missions. It's a conference that happens every year in November, the week before Thanksgiving. This year, unfortunately, due to COVID, they weren't able to have that happen. They did an online, a great little webinar. But this year, it didn't happen as usual, but I'm sure next year or the following year, whenever they're able to gather again, Mental Health and Missions, that conference, if you're looking for a way to get plugged into the world of missionary care, that conference is the way to do it, because it's really the community of missionary care gathers at that conference. And it's pretty heavily kind of swayed towards mental health, so psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors are the primary ones that go to that conference, but there are others who go to it as well. And then to piggyback on that, there's Pastors to Missionaries conference that Barnabas also puts on that conference. And that is a great way to go if you're more of the pastoral role care and you want to get involved in this whole role and world of missionary care for your missionaries. That conference is also usually in the fall, in October, I believe. So that is a really good resource as well. And then Minnesota Renewal. That is also a organization that provides a conference annually for the whole area of missionary care. So those are some of the organizations that are providing a whole lot of networking and support and resources for those who want to learn more about how do you do this whole thing. Right.
A couple of places that I have notes about here, and I know there's a lot more, so don't be offended, but I just know I have some literature and some information, thepilgrimsway.org, missionarycareministry.org. I know Missionary Care Ministries located in the state of Georgia. RestoreHisWorkers.com, that's in Northwest, I believe in the state of Washington. They have a place. And I tell you, the longer we do this, the more we find people that are like, they just have such a heart to take care of missionaries. And so they're like, I built this house. I mean, I know this is a true story. This family in Southern Oregon built a house, and then they built it in such a way so that they live in part of it, but a whole separate part of the house is devoted just for a missionary family to live in.
Yes. So if you yourself are a missionary, or you know a missionary who needs some support, you just need to start looking at some of these organizations or contact us, and we will do what we can to help you find the right fit for you, because they're unlike 20, 30 years ago when either of us were on the field.
Yeah.
This whole area of missionary care has really boomed, and there are resources available. Right. So we want you to know about them, and we want you to get help and support and a place to be refreshed and encouraged, whether it's here at Sanctuary Inn or any of these others that we have mentioned, or even finding just resources, information to understand kind of what you're going through or your kids are going through.
Yeah, or if someone in your family is serving overseas, or close friends that are serving overseas, maybe you can provide some support and encouragement to them if they're looking for something, or you can just suggest, hey, here's a place that I heard about. And again, geographically, there's definitely places that are more accessible depending. I mean, we have people that would love to come to Sanctuary Inn, but I mean, we're in the Northwest, and it's just not feasible for them to make the trip at whatever point at their place they are in ministry or whatever. But there are other places. There's places in the Midwest, places on the East Coast and so on. So there are options.
Yes, so we hope that as you listen to this whole long list of resources, that if you needed one of those, that you jotted it down, and if not, just go look at our show notes, which is on our website at sanctuaryin.org/podcast. And right there you will find today's podcast and all the information you need to know about these various organizations. Hopefully we'll get all these links up there, and it will make it just easier for you to find what you're looking for.
Well, again, thank you for taking the time to listen to the Innkeepers podcast. It's fun for us to sit down and record these things and to share some of these thoughts and ideas. And we hope it's not just fun, but we hope that it's interesting and meaningful for you or for someone that you know.
And feel free to share and let people know that we here at the Innkeepers are excited to support you on your journey of missionary care.
Again, thank you for listening to the Innkeepers. This is Steve.
And this is Cara.
And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Innkeepers podcast. Our mission at Sanctuary Inn is to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers for kingdom purposes. We hope today's podcast was an encouragement to you, and maybe you were prompted to pass this along to someone you know that will benefit from today's conversation. Creating a podcast is a team effort. Cara and I prepare and do the interviews, and we're grateful for the time that our guests give us out of their busy schedules to help us learn more about missionary care.
We also want to thank Tim Downing for the music that he wrote and performed specifically for the Innkeepers podcast. Tim is a very talented musician, and you can learn more about him and his work at downingkeys.com. Our podcast is edited by Javier Bolanos and is produced by Tim Cowley of Cowley Visuals. If you have media needs, including film, photography, or audio, you can reach Tim at cowleyvisuals.com.
Our website and show notes are prepared by Micah Githens, Cara's amazing husband. You can visit the Sanctuary Inn website and learn more about the ministry of Sanctuary Inn at sanctuaryin.org. Thank you again for joining us on our journey to learn more about missionary care.
See you next time.